And on SpotLightUG, we have a very balanced panel. We are celebrating Women's Day, and we cannot forget about the women who are playing a critical role in the ICT sector. We do have a very balanced panel, and I will be letting you know who our panelists are this evening. And we start with...
Elizabeth Ntege, the chairperson of the Ict Association of Uganda, whose mission is to create an effective network between all practitioners, researchers, policy makers, government and the industry to facilitate cross-disciplinary collaboration in the development of the ICT sector in Uganda. She also is CEO of NFT Consult Group, a business process outsourcing and consultancy firm, and the co-founder of the NFT Mawazo, an innovation hub that focuses on IT-enabled services. Prior to NFT, Elizabeth worked as a telecoms engineer for 13 years for entities like Uganda Telecom, British Telecom, BT Concert, and D-Link Europe. She is also a member of the Alliance for Trade in Information Technology and Services Association. Elizabeth serves as a non-executive director on the board of Stanbic Bank, as well as a trustee on the board of Chance for Childhood in the UK. She is an active member of the Business and Professional Women Uganda, where she volunteers on their mentorship program, and is an active member of the Boardroom Africa, as well as the League of East African Directors. She joined Impact to Invest, an initiative that supports the development and sustainability of a growing community of 100 women entrepreneurs and leaders in Africa through innovative business coaching, mentoring, networking, business transformation, and HR.
Welcome, Elizabeth Ntege. Happy Women's Day to you, and good evening. Say hello to our viewers.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Women's Day to you, Mildred and Irene, and everybody that is in the room.
Thank you so much. We'll be engaging you. Next on our panel is...
Irene Kagwa Sewankambo is the Acting Executive Director and Director, Engineering and Communications Infrastructure at the Uganda Communications Commission. She was appointed Acting Executive Director in February 2020. She possesses a vast experience of 20 years in the ICT sector, spanning policy development, research, regulation and implementation in various aspects of ICT policy and regulation. An engineer by profession, Mr. Sewankambo holds a Master of Science in Communication Systems and Signal Processing from the University of Bristol in the United Kingdom and a Master of Science in Economic Management and Policy, that is Business Economic Pathway, from the University of Strathclyde in the United Kingdom. She acquired her Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Engineering from Makerere University in Kampala.
Another lady, I'm glad to wish a happy Women's Day to you, Irene. Say hello to our viewers.
Thank you, Mildred. Good evening, viewers, and happy Women's Day to all.
And now from Irene, now that I'm done with the ladies, we'll move on to the men. And on our panel next is...
Dr. Hatwib Mugasa is the Executive Director of the National Information Technology Authority Uganda, NITAU. Dr. Mugasa has over 15 years of professional experience in the field of telecommunication and innovation research. He holds a doctorate in computational analysis and modeling, an interdisciplinary degree in computational mathematics, data science and statistics. He also holds 2 Masters of Science degrees in computer science and mathematics and a Bachelor of Science degree in computer science. He has experience in research at the Data Mining and Research Lab at Louisiana Tech University in the USA. His research interests and affiliated publications have been related to development, implementation, and evaluation of computational models and tools in biomedical informatics, machine learning, and cybersecurity.
A very good evening to you, Mr. Hatwib. Say hello to us and the viewers.
Thank you, Mildred. Good evening, viewers, and happy Women's Day to all the women of Uganda and the leaders, women leaders in ICT.
Happy to have you on the panel tonight. We'll take on the discussion in just a bit, but let's introduce our very last panelist for the night, who is...
Honorable Vincent Bajire Waiswa is the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance in the Government of Uganda. Vincent is a thought leader in the ICT for development field in the region and internationally. He holds an MBA from Glasgow Caledonian University, a Master's in Sciences in Macroeconomics from the University of Bradford, and a Bachelor's of Sciences in Computing and Information Technology from the University of Derby. He is formerly the Chief Executive Officer of Bridges.org, a Washington, D.C.-based IT policy not-for-profit organization. Before joining the ministry, he was a Member of Parliament and Chairperson of the Parliamentary Sessional Committee on Information and Communication Technology. He also established the Center for International ICT Policy for East and Southern Africa, CIPESA, as well as BROSDI, a non-profit organization here in Uganda. He is an Ashoka Fellow for Life, Archbishop Desmond Tutu Leadership Fellow, and an alumni of the Young Global Leadership Program of World Economic Forum. He has also attended professional courses at Said Business School, University of Oxford, Wits University in South Africa, and Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, among others.
And let's now say a very good afternoon to our panelist, Honorable. A very good evening. I'm used to mornings because I wake up very early in the morning. But say hello to us, Honorable Vincent Bajire.
Good evening, viewers, and happy Women's Day to all the ladies of Uganda. Thank you.
Well, quite brief, but to the point for the women, of course. It's our day today. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me on this particular discussion that will be focusing on information communication technology. Back in the past, many thought this was for, you know, the dot-com era kids, like they used to call them, the young people who are excited about technology. But what we are realizing as time passes by is that it is a part of us, and we either adopt or we are left behind. But as we continue with this discussion, the hashtag to follow up on the discussion online is hashtag SpotLightUG, and we are broadcasting live on NBS Television, the Political Command Center, but also broadcasting live on Uganda Broadcasting Corporation, UBC. Join us on our social media platforms, send in your questions, and we will direct them to our panelists, and so that you can be able to get the answers. My name is Mildred Tohaise, and welcome to Spotlight UG. Let's start off with the parent ministry, the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance. Many get to ask what exactly the ministry is about, where we are right now in planning with regards to ICT for the country. Honorable Bajire, over to you.
Thank you. The ministry is responsible for determining policy, formulating it, and implementing the policies. In that respect, as a ministry, we are responsible for ensuring that there is ICT infrastructure in the country, but also that we have adequate e-services that would run on that infrastructure. And in that regard, we develop policies and pass these policies to the agencies for implementation, the agencies being UCC, who are here today, as well as the National IT Authority. And in doing this, we take into consideration that government does not operate in isolation, but we have a private sector that also makes a fundamental contribution to both infrastructure as well as services in our bid to automate all the services in the country. So by and large, the ministry is responsible or has a mandate to ensure that the country's digital agenda is implemented, so that as Uganda, we are not left behind in the knowledge economy, so that we actively participate in the knowledge economy. To do that, we must indeed have infrastructure, technology infrastructure for that matter, the telecom masts, as you see, fiber, as well as satellite technology, to ensure that the e-services can ride on that infrastructure, so that we ease the access of services to the citizens in Uganda using ICT as a medium.
All right. We know that we are getting entirely done with the National Development Plan 2, with National Development Plan 3 setting in. What are the successes and challenges in NDP 2 that we need to pay attention to in NDP 3, and what is the plan for government with regard to ICT for NDP 3?
Well, we've had some fundamental achievements in NDP 2. And these relate to the automation of services on the one hand, but as well as access to ICT. And I think my colleague, Irene Kagwa, will give us more detail on that. But I can just say that in 2016, when we started implementing the NDP2, we had in the region of 22 million telephone subscribers. Today, they are in the region of 28 million subscribers. And we know for a fact that to access services online, you need to have people connected. And we see that financial inclusion is increasing, and there are more and more Ugandans accessing services online with mediums such as Jumia that they're using to access services. We are doing e-commerce as a country, but most fundamentally, we have spread infrastructure in areas that did not have infrastructure in the past. For instance, in the NDP 2 period, government was in position to take the NBI to West Nile, where it wasn't, in Moroto as well. And in the NDP 3, what you're going to do is to, first of all, consolidate the gains of the NDP 2, but most fundamentally to ensure that we have as much infrastructure as possible, and certainly to ensure that we automate as much as possible, because we believe that once services are automated, Ugandans can indeed access services without queuing in long lines to get a service, especially from the government departments that are indeed meant to be serving the public.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll be getting back to the nitty-gritties of some of those achievements. I'll come to you, Mr. Atwip Mugasa. As NITA, you're mandated to coordinate, promote, and monitor the development of information technology in the country. How are you faring on this? And let's take a look at where NITA was and where it is right now.
Thank you, Mildred. NITA Uganda is the thinking and implementing arm for the initiatives of government in IT. And we started with national backbone infrastructure and e-government infrastructure services. The national backbone infrastructure is a high-speed optic cable that enables transit of internet between the MDAs, or the ministries, districts, and agencies. That was its initial objective. We moved from that point to transit or to transport internet to all regions of Uganda. So we are not focusing on only MDAs, the ministries, districts, and agencies. We are now looking at the whole of Uganda. We started in Kampala and Entebbe. Those were only 2 districts in Uganda with 27 points of contact, or 27 sites. We have expanded that penetration to 609 sites by the end of the NDP 2. And we intend to now grow that to the whole of Uganda in 134 districts, with close to 10,000 sites by end of NDP 3.
You've talked about the national backbone infrastructure and all the monies that government has invested. Would you say for the Ugandans, for government, there's been value for money?
Definitely it has. The national backbone infrastructure, phase 1, was costed at about 30,000 USDs. Initial projects usually start, there's a slow momentum that has started with the initial projects, but at that time the cost of internet was in thousands of dollars for 1 megabyte per second. we have brought down that cost to $70 for 1 megabyte per second. So the value, the benefit to government, the cost saving that the NBI has made to government has been really beneficial. Not just only the NBI, we also provision services. So the provisioning of these services, the cost saving and efficiency of these services have been a benefit to government.
All right. I love that we've reduced, you know, the Mbps cost, but it still remains one of the highest in East Africa. We'll be discussing that and why we are still at that, even when it seems to have reduced. But let me get to the Uganda Communications Commission, our regulator. When we talk UCC, we are thinking about regulation of, you know, telecommunication, regulation of communication across the country. But first, let's look at UCC, where it was, where it is right now, and what Ugandans need to know much more about UCC than just that agency that switches off radios and TVs at some point in time.
Mildred, you had to bring that one, right?
That's what Ugandans know.
No, Uganda Communications Commission is a lot more. As Honorable Bajiri mentioned, the regulator, and most people tend to think of us as the policeman in the sector, but we are actually not about just enforcement. There's so much more to regulation than just enforcement of rules. We are the body that licenses the operators. You mentioned telecommunications. We oversee media. We oversee radio communications, including two-way radios. So over to you, that kind of communication. Courier services are also regulated by us. And of course, UPTC. Now, in respect of regulation, what do? I've mentioned the licensing. Once you license, you're giving somebody conditions upon which they are supposed to operate in the country. So it's not enough to just say, yes, these are the rules, go and start operating. We also ensure there is fair competition among the operators. And why do we look at competition? It's actually for the benefit of the consumer, because at the end of the day, you want a consumer to have a choice. Gone are the days when we all look back to, 1977, when there was only one operator providing all the services. Today, you get to have a choice. You decide and compare. Do I want A? Do I want B? What is B offering that A doesn't have? So you get that choice. And as a regulator, that's one of the things we seek to do, and make sure that the Ugandans across the country have that benefit. But you also heard from the PS in terms of making sure everybody enjoys these services. So you do not want that this is the service, as you say, the .com or the service for the people in Kampala. You want to make sure, as you said, that ICTs bring benefits to everyone across the country, be it a woman, be it a man, be it a child, be it an adult, be it a person with disabilities or not, or even a person who possibly is considered by the statistics to be in the poverty levels. So as a commission, we set out to also ensure that these services move across the country. Everybody gets to enjoy that. The other aspect that we deal with a lot is setting standards. And typically when I speak to standards, I normally give an example of a shoe. When you go to a shop to buy a shoe, you're not going to try on every single shoe. You probably say size 5, size 6, because there's a standard. So if there was no standard, you'd need to try on each and every one of that shoe. In the same context, within the communication sector, Uganda Communications Commission sets the standards for operation by the operators, so that as you come in as a provider of services, you know what technical standards you're supposed to comply with, what regulatory standards, what consumer protection standards you're also supposed to. I could speak the whole day, but I think I'll leave it to you.
All right, maybe just before you leave that very point, you've talked about you not just being the policeman, but the regulator, dealing with setting standards and licenses. And a Ugandan out there is asking, apart from maybe cracking the whip, if it's a carrot and stick approach, at what point in time do you bring out the carrot? Do you act as an enabler of the very people that you do, rule over, for lack of a better word?
I'm glad you asked that, and because we always tell the operators, we are actually your partner. We are not your headmaster, we are partner. And in many cases, we, for example, are advocates of the operators to other agencies, to other parts of government. So we advocate their interests to the various parts of government to make sure that they get that enabling environment that allows them to invest and provide quality and forward-looking services. We also, of course, also engage. We don't want to sit and assume we know or we understand. So we typically have engagements, for example, with the National Association of Broadcasters, who we have a very good relationship with, and through them we jointly conduct training for the media houses. We engage to understand what are the challenges the operators are having in operation within the country. That way, all our decisions and our actions are informed rather than based on assumptions.
All right. I'll be getting back to you. Elizabeth, maybe many Ugandans or a few tonight are hearing about the Ict Association of Uganda for the very first time. If you would, what is the Ict Association of Uganda about, and what so far have you achieved as an association?
Okay, thank you, Mildred. The Ict Association of Uganda was actually formed in 2014 by a group of ICT practitioners whose aim was mainly to create an umbrella association for all in the ICT sector. Sorry. So the mission of the association has already been introduced in my introduction. I think everybody has had a look at that. But in a nutshell, the association is focused on developing a strong ICT sector through partnerships and facilitating effective networks and collaborations with relevant stakeholders. And our stakeholders are mainly made up of, there are quite a number, and some of them are sitting here with me. In the private sector, we're looking at Ugandan IT and IT-enabled companies. We're looking at the Uganda National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We're looking at the Uganda Manufacturers Association, various tech hubs that we have in Uganda, like Innovation Village, Outbox, and Hive Collab. We also look at the iNetwork of Uganda, and most importantly, the Private Sector Foundation. And our stakeholders in the public sector, some of them are sitting here with me, as I mentioned. We have NITAU, UCC, the ministry itself, the Uganda Registration Services Bureau, local government and its departments, the National Council of Services of Technology, the Office of the Prime Minister, and quite a number there. And then we also have stakeholders who are our development partners, like the ITC, the Netherlands Trust Fund, Trademark East Africa is also one of our stakeholders, and we work with them very closely. And UK's Department for International Development, which is known as DFID. But over and above that, we also have other strategic partnerships who are in academia, like all the universities, and multilateral institutes like the World Bank, WTO, and IMF, and global knowledge partnership foundations that are available for us. So the list is quite exhaustive because, as you know, ICT touches every sector in Uganda today. Yeah. Okay. So that is it in a nutshell, and those are our partners and our stakeholders.
All right, and since you just partner with government, there is a lot that you have to say about the good or the challenges that there are, and we'll be talking about those. But I'm glad that UCC and ministry are seated right next to each other. And at this onset of saying SpotLightUG will be focusing on ICT, the very first question and most frequent has been, why is Facebook still off? I'll start with UCC.
Thank you. I was wondering why you didn't start with ministry. That
Ladies first, and it's Women's Day.
No, Facebook is still off. We are actually, as a government of Uganda, engaged in discussions with Facebook to be able to improve the offering and working of Facebook with the government of Uganda and the people of Uganda for the general development of our country. There's been all sorts of speculations about the why, but it's really about how do we improve and make sure this service is for the better, not taking us backwards in terms of as a country. So that is the only reason it's still off, and I'm optimistic that the discussions will become fruitful and we'll be able to possibly not resume, but get to instead a better position in terms of working with Facebook.
There has also been a time when you did write to Facebook management over some bloggers and some sites. I do not know, or Ugandans are still asking, did Facebook reply? Has there been any kind of communication between the letter that you wrote yourselves and Facebook management?
There is actually a significant amount of communication that has been going on between Facebook. Only that the communication hasn't been in the public eye. So we've been having communication not just in the recent past, that was only an aspect, but the relationship between Facebook and UCC and other parts of Uganda, of the government of Uganda, actually extends way beyond just that period. And yes, to answer your question, they did respond.
All right, and I'll come to you, Honorable Bajire. The reason why many are concerned about Facebook, it's not just a social media site where people get to talk and chat, but many have promoted businesses, many have their businesses running online and on Facebook, and they're stuck and they're asking, what next? Is government even thinking about us in that regard?
Well, first, Irene should have mentioned that they wrote to Facebook based on complaints, and the complaints were not just from sections of government, but also the public, individuals who have been impersonated, like yourself, Mildred. You may find a number of people passing off with your persona, claiming they are you, yet in actual sense they are not. And those are issues that indeed need to be addressed. The challenge we have is these global tech companies that sit in California. So we must find a balance where we as Ugandans or even Africa, we can engage with these institutions at the same level. Because Facebook is or makes resources or money from advertising largely because they're Ugandans who are subscribing to the platform. Yeah. So it's only fair that Ugandans also have a degree of say or have a right. I know people in government who have been impersonated, and it took 6 months for those pages to be brought down. I, for one, I think there's somebody who passes off as Vincent Bajiri. I'm not on Facebook, and it's still running up to today. So those are the issues we're engaging with Facebook to ensure that we streamline. And indeed, this is not alien. They are doing it in Europe. In Europe, they play on different scales. But when it comes to Africa, they think we can pass off. We don't have a right to complain. There's a rigorous process for you to get a response. So what we are doing is to ensure that these global entities that indeed make money by virtue of the subscriptions that they have in Africa, not just Uganda, can come to us, and we also agree. Because we have national laws, and they can't be operating in the country without paying attention to the laws that are in the country. So we need to harmonize that, and I think it's important. It's for the good of all Ugandans.
All right. Studies have shown that social media actually drives internet uptake, and as Uganda, we are still looking at internet penetration and encouraging more and more people to come through. Is government looking at a balance between, having to block a social media site like Facebook and the views that come with social media in relation to internet uptake?
Well, Mildred, I'll say this. We have 18 million, and I stand to be corrected, internet users in Uganda today. We only have less than 3 million Facebook users. So if you are to go by that statistic, I don't think indeed internet usage is driven by social media.
And in a view as well, whereas there are few on Facebook, Facebook could be linked to a number of other, social media sites, including, WhatsApp itself. But I would look at this as digital colonization in context, and how is government dealing with promoting innovation to probably have a Facebook of our own?
Well, I think you've nailed it, and I think that's where we are moving, because we have economies such as China. They don't rely. We need to understand one thing. The more we promote international platforms, the more we deprive Ugandans who have studied software development, software engineering, computing and information technology, the opportunity to create jobs. So indeed, at an appropriate time, we shall send out a call to ask Ugandans to put for us a collaborative platform that Ugandans can enjoy and probably even export.
All right. Now, since we're talking about Facebook and social media platforms, that brings me to Mr. Mugasa with Nita Yu. Now speaking about internet environment and data security, Honorable Bajire talked about impersonation. We have a number of laws, including the Computer Misuse Act. We have the Data Protection and Privacy Act of 2019, Electronic Transactions Act, to mention but a few, so many laws. But is our IT environment safe?
Thank you, Mildred. Yes, we have a couple of laws that we have drafted in partnership with the ministry and other stakeholders. As NITA, we create an enabling environment for ICT to be utilized for the development, for social and economic development of the citizens of Uganda. The laws that are drafted are set to build a structure in which development can happen. It could be a procedure structure, but also security structure. So they guide on the ICT development within the sector. And we are confident that the laws that have been put in place, the National Information Security Framework and the National Data Protection and Privacy Act, will benefit the country and expedite the development in Uganda.
Okay. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
I wanted to expand more on the Data Protection and Privacy Act. This has been a well-received act that most of the businesses were waiting for. We know in our constitution, Article 27, subsection 2, it guides on the sharing of data, private data, personal data. And we know that data is your foundation of the economy, personal data. So without this law, it was challenging for businesses to, multinational businesses to come to Uganda. And also within our economy, the individual did not have confidence with the way his data was being shared. But now we have that confidence and protection and security within the IT sector.
All right. Thank you very much. Coming to you, Elizabeth, yes. I know that data security is very important for the private sector, even for government, as much as it is for government, so it is for the private sector. What has been your experience as IT players, as the ICT Association of Uganda? Where are the challenges? And I want you to particularly as well speak to the aspect of the environment, the safety and security of the IT environment in which we operate as a country.
Okay, the environment is quite robust, and there is actually an association that deals with that kind of information security of the network. So we've been quite lucky that we have built capacity in the security of our networks within Uganda, both in the private sector and in the public sector. So it's nothing to worry about right now, because we have the capacity to handle security over our networks right now. So it's not a challenge as far as private sector is concerned, they're able to handle it, and they have the ability to do that.
All right, and talking about the partial lockdown, now we are talking about Facebook, which is not yet open.
Yes.
I know there are a number, blackouts, so to say. There are a number of your players or people in the ICT Association who may be affected, or even if not affected, have a few suggestions on the way how government could be able to handle this. Have you had such discussions in the association?
Yes. Yeah, this happened after the main internet was opened. Our members raised some concern about the way government went about closing the internet and then finally opening it up, because a lot of them were economically and affected by the lockdown at that time. So there've been some talk. We actually had a meeting with Irene and her team with regards to the concerns of the public sector and how that should have been handled, because we hadn't been, there were no discussions with the association at the time. We also acknowledge that we have been very silent as an association, and therefore we are looking forward to better collaboration and understanding as far as when such things happen. In regards to whether there is trust as to whether it won't happen again, we believe that it will happen again. So
you want to back a little more at government in the way they do their work?
Yeah.
Okay.
So no, what is going to happen is that the members and the members of the association, especially in private sector, believe that there will be another lockdown in one way or the other, either through the scenario that happened where it was a security threat, or maybe some disaster or something that might happen. But the idea is to be ready for such a scenario, so that when it happens, it has the least amount of effect on our business than it did when the previous one happened. Yeah.
All right, Irene has a supplement to that. Please go ahead.
Yes.
It actually is in respect of the subject both of them were handling in terms of security. We look at security from, we've put the laws, we put the rules, we put the systems. We have to remember in there is a person. And that is why continuously the various agencies are trying to sensitize the public to understand that the security of the network, your laxness as an individual, may compromise a very good and secure system. So as we discuss the issue of, is our sector secure, is the data secure, we have to remember that we have to ask ourselves, are we in line, are we complying with the cybersecurity SOPs? Just like we have health SOPs, there are cybersecurity SOPs. So if we as individuals, simple things like they tell you, change your password often, and you don't. And that is why we also have to be cognizant that the sector we're in is dynamic. The same way we have people who are innovating for good, we have people who are innovating. So the same way you build security around a house and decide that now I'm going to have alarms established, the thief is trying to find another way around and possibly dig under the boundary wall. I'm not giving thieves out there an idea, but just to give you an idea that even in the security, even in the IT world or in the ICT sector, the same way we continue to find ways to plug the holes, we continuously have to keep doing this, because they are the negative, the bad guys who are out to do no good are also continuously finding ways to try and circumvent the prevention that has been put.
Okay. While you focus on the various, the scope of your work, what comes to my mind is the emerging technologies. Just recently, we did not have the bloggers on the list Now they are, and there's been a lot of, discussion about it's my internet, it's my phone, it's my everything, and then you as well want to come in and regulate. Just how much attention are you giving to emerging technologies? You're paying attention to Facebook, then comes a TikTok, which may also have a lot of toxic content, then comes another application and technology. How are you monitoring these, and how are you fusing them together?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And to put that into context, I'll give you mobile money. Before mobile money came, it was a non-issue because we didn't know about it. So you couldn't have anticipated to have laws and regulations in place to regulate mobile money. As regulators, Uganda Communications Commission, Bank of Uganda, we chose to do a test and learn approach where we allowed the innovation to go and start running. And there's a tendency for people to think we regulate for the sake of regulation. I can regulate that, so I'm coming in with a new regulation. We regulate for purpose. So we studied the mobile money service to identify what are the aspects that needed regulation. And you notice that it was not until last year that a law has come into place that oversees mobile money. So in respect of also these other new technologies that continue to come, the law, of course, anticipates that that's going to happen. So it gives UCC the right to classify new services. And we have a dedicated department for research that is tasked to keep monitoring the trends so that we are relevant. What is coming? What is it that we need to do to facilitate its adoption into Uganda? Because it's not about just me regulating. What is it that I need to do as a regulator to enable, to incentivize the investors to adopt that technology or to adopt that new service and provide it to the public of Uganda?
All right. Just for the audience, while you're taking up the new technologies, remember UCC is watching. That's what Irene is just trying to remind us here. Coming to the Ministry of ICT, while we promote internet penetration and talking about ICT, because I was looking at some of the statistics that in the third quarter of 2020, internet penetration was at about 48%, increasing by about 2 percentage points from the second quarter of 2020. But now, the society looks at government as bringing in what they call regressive measures. You have the OTT, that is what society thinks. You have the over-the-top tax, and we're talking about internet penetration. So someone is thinking, I'll either use VPN or I will not pay. I would rather stay without using internet. And then you have the mobile money, the 0.5 on mobile money transactions. Are we moving 3 steps forward and 5 steps backwards, Honorable Bajire?
I think we're moving forward, certainly. But first of all, we are the Ministry of ICT, responsible for ICT. There is an entire ministry, very powerful ministry, responsible for tax policy, which is the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. So I'm sure they will have their day, and they'll respond to
Ugandan out there thinks that they do that in consultation with your ministry as well.
Yes, they consult, but ultimately they make the decision. I can consult, but I reserve the right to to take what I feel is appropriate. But having said that, I think we've had discussions with our colleagues at Finance, and we are hoping, because we're having discussions in different parameters or areas, we feel that we need to reduce the cost of the device, the smartphone. So those are discussions we're having with the Ministry of Finance as well, to see to it that we increase penetration over the internet, but as well as voice, so that people can have smartphones at affordable costs. Because when we automate services, our belief is that many more Ugandans will start accessing services online rather than queuing, as I said earlier. So we're having that discussion on the one hand, but I think, again, we've had a discussion with them on OTT, but we continue to have discussions. Hopefully, something will come out of that.
All right, Irene had something as well.
Goes back to your earlier comment about people use internet only for social media, and what Honorable Bajire was talking about of our local networks or local services. Now, when you evaluate why aren't people online, he has mentioned the issue of device ownership. For many people, the device is still very expensive, and you've seen the industry try to run campaigns like a Kwata Simu to make sure that that is lowered down. You've seen government make sure they promote the development of local phones, so that again that gap is identified. But going back to why do I get online? Unlike the telephony, for many people long ago in our times, we used to have the pen pals. And so for many people, if you're telling them internet is about social media, they're like, so who am I going to talk to? Who am I going to chat with? Mm-hmm. I don't have a friend abroad. I don't have, what am I going online for? So as a government, we've noted that we need to also focus on the issue of relevance of the services, and create locally relevant services. You've seen a lot of work that has been done by NITA. You've seen activities also done by UCC to make sure farmers out there see how is ICTs relevant to them. Let it not just be about Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. What else can they do? Why should I spend my 500 or 100 shillings and go online? To do what? Vis-a-vis maybe collect it in a tin and be able to address the needs. So we need to make sure that we improve that relevance of the services to our people, so that at the end of the day, it's not about this small percentage of people that's already online and using it for social media, but we bring more people on board, more Ugandans, especially when we say it's supposed to be inclusive. And this goes back to also your question about the cost. When you have a cake and we're just the two of us, of course we're going to have big chunks. The more people that come on board, the smaller the chunks. Same to the internet. When the cost of the service is only among a small market, you are going to have very high prices, because a lot of it is going to be passed on to you. So we need to address that economics and make sure we grow the market. And that's why we're having all these interventions aimed at addressing what are the gaps we've seen. There's connectivity, there's cost, there's device ownership, there's relevance, there's even skilling. Unlike a bicycle you put there and a curious child gets on it easily, when it's a computer, there is the fear of, I'm going to break it. I'm going to mess it up. What if it all crashes? So we've noticed a need to also do that digital skilling, even in the basics of saying, how do you use a search engine? What's a search engine? Why would I need it? So how do I go to Google, for example? Then after I get to Google, what happens? Because unlike calling, where you say press green when you want to call and press red when you want to end the call, with internet you need a bit more skilling. So these are some of the issues we've noted we need to address if we are to grow the usage of internet in Uganda. And
this is some of the issues I'd like to put to you, Elizabeth, as well. Irene has talked about the aspect of creating relevant services locally, and that is what would attract so many other people to come through, and then probably later on, like she has said, looking at the dynamics of cost versus, the numbers there, we wouldn't have to be complaining a lot about the numbers. How much are you trying to have as many people join and encompass ICT in their day-to-day living as an association?
Obviously, that's our daily bread as an association. Our members are working on internet and internet inclusion on a daily basis, because that's their bread and butter. The challenge comes with exactly what Irene was mentioning, the lack of local content. We tend to go outside of our country to get some of the services that we need. So there's a real action towards building capacity locally on all aspects of ICT, including but not limited to building locally mined content. to the level where we need it in the different languages that we have in Uganda. I was talking to somebody earlier this evening, and they were telling me how internet penetration in Tanzania is so high because they have a lot of local content in Kiswahili. We have a challenge. We have over 33 languages, and we need to actively build local content and make it relevant for the people so that they can access it, coupled with reducing the price of the CPE and the digital skilling that is coming about. Right. So we are quite excited about that, especially through our innovation hubs that are all over the country in a way, to try and build local content and include more people in the services that we offer.
All right, shortly before we do take a break, let me engage you, Mr. Mugasa, about how you as NITA are coming in to help the different MDAs and the districts across the country to ensure that there is internet access, because at least by 2018, there was just over about 60 districts who were connected on 3G out of the 121 then. In 2018, we now have about 146 districts, and people are even asking about 5G.
Yes, thank you, Mildred. Just before I answer that, I wanted to expand more on the current issue that has been discussed. Yes. Accessing or providing internet access to the innovators. At NITA, we are reaching out to the innovators, the associations. We are mindful of the challenges that Uganda as a country has in providing affordable internet to the innovation community. So we reach out to them, we listen to them, see their challenges, work with them on providing a preferable rate with support on providing internet connectivity to their locations. We also provide we support in providing other facilities, either if it's a computer, working space, and connections to the market out there. And we are looking at developing this market by building an IT park. I know some may not even have the funds to get a location to start at, so we are going to provide that space to invite them and provide the services. Back to the question about penetration to all the districts. Yes, we are about 60 districts at the moment. We have plans for the next phase of the NBI that is going to be covering the remaining close to about 50 districts. That's in the northeastern region. We will expand on that in 2 projects. There's a phase 5 of the NBI and UDAP. Phase 5 runs a highway cable all the way to the north and covers all the districts that were not reached. UDAP will run the last mile, because the NBI, or the National Backbone Infrastructure, it's a highway cable. But we need to get to those MDAs, those last end users, all the way to the sub-county. So within UDAP, we will be reaching the last mile user in established locations and underserved locations. So we're not neglecting even the underserved. We intend to cover them in the next phase of the NBI.
All right, we continue with this discussion. It's only getting better with expounding more on the issues that you have been asking online. And for our viewers on UBC TV, thank you so much for joining us. Our viewers on NBS Television, thank you so much for joining us as well. We'll take a very short break, and when we do return, a lot more. There is complaints about the quality of service from the telcos. A lot of you are asking, you subscribe for your TV, and yet another television station like NBS TV or UBC as well has to pay again the pay TV to be able to exist on their platform. How come that does exist in a country like that, and much more when we do return.
Today tastes like a new tradition, like an old favorite. Tastes like all hands on deck and all eyes on the prize. Today tastes like a piece of the action. And it never tasted this good.
Kapo, you seem to be in a hurry. Where are you going to?
I'm gonna pay URA visit.
But you can access URA online. Why pay a visit?
To know more about the Kakasa business solutions, namely digital tracking solution, the voluntary disclosure program, and electronic fiscal receipting and invoicing solution, which have turned my business around. You know I need to be on top of my game to protect my empire. If you know, you know.
I too need to know what Kapo knows.
Kakasa, be sure you are in charge of your business. Uganda Revenue Authority, developing Uganda together.
Kwate simu. Kwate simu.
Kwate simu. Kwate simu. For the first time in Uganda, you can pay in installments and own a smartphone instantly. Get to own the Samsung A3 core, Samsung A01 or Samsung A11 and pay back in either daily, weekly or monthly installments for a period of a year. To check if you're eligible for the offer, dial *284*49# today. You also enjoy free 500 MB on the purchased phone every month for the entire loan repayment period. Ha! Uganda nyuma! Airtel, the smartphone network, in proud partnership with MasterCard, Samsung, and Asante Financial Services.
We can't tolerate sexual harassment.
Sexual harassment is unacceptable in our school.
Because a good school equals a better life.
Raising voices.
If you want to benefit from the cabbage, you can decide to go for the dry season planting or the wet season planting. Those are key things to look at. But the other bit is about the yield and the maturity period.
Agriculture has been for years forming the backbone of Uganda's economy, contributing approximately 37% of local growth, with 80% of the population practicing agriculture.
Green tea is different from black tea. Green tea does not go through the fermentation process of the factory, meaning that it has retained all the medicinal values in it.
This is a good leaf for plucking. When it is already marked, so like it has the marks.
Yes.
It is very easy for a farmer to just follow those markings and then drop.
Join us every Wednesday as we showcase comprehended and well-researched episodes on agriculture, on the new innovations, planting, harvesting, modern technologies, and more you would like to know in the farming field.
The farmers, they no longer bring more of comb honey.
So after extracting the honey from the frames, then they are removed and placed back in a super.
Farm Matters, a program where all your farming needs are addressed.
Solution to farmers for what they need. What farmers need is income in their pocket, isn't it? It's about money in the pocket.
This program has helped me to improve farming skills. Keep watching Farm Matters at UBC.
Hello, my name is Dr. Henry Dungu, a consultant in hematology and oncology. Health promotion and disease prevention programs focus on keeping people healthy. They aim to engage and empower individuals and communities to choose healthy behaviors and make changes that reduce the risk of developing chronic diseases and other illnesses. Join me on New Health Chat every Thursday at 9 p.m. on UBC TV, sponsored by National Medical Stores, who are mandated to procure store and distribute essential medicines and medical supplies to all public health facilities in the country.
Uganda, the land of sunshine. Breathtaking, stunning sights, incredibly extensive large greenery.
Uganda's ICT sector is considered one of the most vibrant and fastest growing within the east of Uganda. NITA-U, Honorable Vincent Bajire Waiswa, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Information, Communications and Technology.
Deeper into the ICT sector of Uganda, how do we get better and also get to see reduced prices at the end of the day? Like we've been told, clearly there is a correlation between the numbers and the cost. The more the number, the less the cost, and the less the numbers, so is the cost being high. Still with us is the Ministry of ICT, represented by Honorable Vincent Bajira, who is the Permanent Secretary. We also have NITA-U, represented by the ED. We do also still have the ICT Association and the regulator, Uganda Communications Commission, on this discussion. I'll start off with the Uganda Communications Commission on the aspect of quality of service from the telcos. Ugandans have complained about dropped calls. Ugandans have complained about unsolicited messages. What is the Commission doing?
Thank you, Mildred, for that very good question that we keep getting over and over again, and the opportunity to explain. Now, quality of service is something we need to appreciate what it is. The quality of service varies, first and foremost, with location. So we might have different experience within this room, and when you get outside of that door, you might have again a different experience. It also varies with time. So at a material time, you may have a very good service, and then the next, that changes. And this is due to a number of reasons. One of the things that typically affects quality of service is coverage. Now, as you move across the country, we desire to have that situation where I can drive from Kampala to Gulu and continue to have my call uninterrupted. But the reality of it is the network is currently in pockets. So we still have gaps along the way. For what it's worth, I'm yet to find a country that doesn't have gaps, but as a country we're aspiring still to make sure all our gaps are addressed. The other issue that tends to also impact quality of service is the network plan. Because for a call to be sustained, you have to be able to have a signal. Now, when you have, today you might have, good coverage in an area, then the next day you have a tall building. That building acts as an obstacle because it cuts off the signal. The phone needs to be able to hear the tower to be able to communicate with the network. Now, when that signal is obstructed, whether by, a moving object that is able to impact the signal, sorry for going very technical, as soon as you cut that off, the phone will not be able to communicate with the network. Now, these are some of the issues that impact. Now, when you go, for example, in an underground or a basement of a building, depending on the network, on the mast that is there, if that mast used a higher frequency, radio frequencies are in the air, and that's what the operators use for the networks to communicate. Now, when you're in the basement, the walls of the basements affect the penetration of those signals. So you're going to have worse coverage there, and you're likely to drop. If you also go into a place where there are suddenly so many people, because it's like you have a room, and you said the capacity of this room is 100 people. If suddenly there are 150 people, they're going to be squashed. Now, the same thing for a telecommunication network. If a site has capacity for 50 people, it's not normally 50, but hypothetically 50, and suddenly we have a big event in the area. So many people then go to that area and you end up having 500 people try to use that site. It gets overwhelmed, it gets congested, and you will fail. Some of you will not be able to. That's why you'll find you're seated next to someone and they are able to log onto the network and you fail to get. Your phone, your quality of phone also matters. Because some of them, just like as a human being, I may have a hearing defect, some of them are not very good in quality in being able to pick a signal. So they need a strong signal for them to be able to operate. So if you have that kind of phone, as soon as the signal becomes a bit weak, it's going to cut off, unlike someone who will have a phone that can still pick up a stronger signal. That said, of course, we also notice on the side of the operators, every year we conduct monitoring exercises as Uganda Communications Commission, where we assess to see, are the operators, I mentioned earlier, standards. So we give them standards. Are they meeting those standards, and why aren't they? And then engage with them to make sure that the remedial action is done. The other effort we are putting in place to say we want to empower a consumer such that you will be able to check your own quality of service. That way, when you say my quality of service is bad, you will have an app that is able to tell you the exact measures you're doing. And we believe this is going to give the consumer a louder voice and help us in addressing the quality of service needs. We expect this in a few months. A contract has already been awarded for it. And this is similar. Instead of using these foreign apps, we'll have our own national app where every consumer will have a right to be able to check the quality of service they're receiving from their service provider.
Okay. Having given these aspects that could determine the quality of service, some Ugandans get to ask themselves why they are in particular district and they're probably picking a signal over telecom from Kenya or Tanzania or something like that. What is the reality about our telecommunication coverage in the country?
Now, the reality is the radio waves go out the same way you see waves on a water body going out. Radio waves continue to go out until they fade or until they get a barrier that stops them. Now, as a result, they don't know borders. So they won't get to the border of Uganda and say, oops, I'm now crossing into Kenya, I have to drop. So when you have a mast of the other operator in the other country very close to the border, and your phone typically always scans for the strongest signal. Remember that we use the same frequencies in Uganda as they use in the neighboring country. So your phone is manufactured such that it will just keep looking for what's the strongest signal. So as you get to the border, it's trying to calculate, is this signal stronger or the other? Where the signal of the country across is stronger and is an agreement to roam, it immediately picks up the other one and puts you on the other network, because the roaming is supposed to help you make sure you're seamless.
All right. Maybe just before I leave you still on the quality of service, customers have complained about what they call exploitation, and that's the reality of it from telcos. I subscribe for my either data bundles or voice bundles, and before I could even, I can even use 10% or 20%, the expiration date comes through and I have to be cut off, and they're asking, where does this money go at the end of it all?
Very good question. And it's a debate that we've been having with the operators. Now again, similar to the other economics of the cost of service. In the case of voice telephony, you're almost buying just the capacity, because you're paying by the minutes. What you use is what you pay for, because they charge you based on a usage fee. Now, in the case of data, you tend to lease space, you're booking space. So if you compare, I normally use the shipment or logistics example, where when you're abroad and you want to send something, you will go to the shipper and say, I want to book space in your container, and a number of you, so that the shipper books space based on anticipated demand. Now, in the same case for internet, that has typically been the economics, that you're buying, you're booking space before you use it, because you're not paying. That's why you lease it in advance and buy a bundle. Not that you're buying the minutes that you're paying for.
Already.
So that has been the economics. But over the years, you've seen how the economics of the different services has changed. And we are hoping that this too is an area where the operators are going to step back and listen to the consumers and the government agencies that advocate the consumer protection to say maybe that economics can change, the same way we've always struggled with some other areas we've seen change along the years.
Okay, and I'll come to you, Honorable Vincent Bajide. When Irene says the operators will step back and listen to the consumers, a Ugandan out there is saying and thinking, are government's hands tied in such a case? That there is a lot of money that is being spent, it is being used up, paid for but not used, and the telcos are actually gaining at the end of it all.
Well, I think I know for a fact that one of the operators has changed their business model, or is changing their business model, MTN to be very specific, and I think now they have bundles that do not expire. And what happens in the telecom sector is once one of the operators takes a certain direction, it has been common for the others to follow.
Okay.
And indeed, that action, we can argue, has been a result of the operator listening to the voices of the users or the customers who have been saying, indeed, exactly what you're saying, that we need to know where these bundles go and why indeed they expire. So it's been about the business model that the telecom operators developed, and this has everything to do with the cost at which they buy the bandwidth for it to be delivered in Uganda. Earlier on you mentioned the cost, but we need to know that, or to understand and appreciate that we are landlocked, and indeed to terminate data here, we go through the various countries that get it from the sea. If it's fiber optic, they get it from the sea, terminate it into Uganda. So there are all those attendant costs that the operators have to bear. Having said that, the numbers are increasing. As Irene mentioned earlier, we are getting more and more users on the internet. And I think going forward, we are seeing a shift where the operators will have no choice but to charge us for what we have used and leave what we have not used to be used for another day.
Still talking about the operators, we know Uganda is a signatory to IMF's structural adjustment policy, and we operate a free market economy. That way we've attracted FDIs and you know, many other people to invest in the telecom sector. But still we have oligopolies, if I would be right to say. Two companies, to be specific, Airtel and MTN, that take a greater share of the market. That means the others, including Uganda Telecom, have a very limited market share and therefore have to either engage in intense price cuts to be able to attract more people to them, to their disadvantage. How much is government doing to ensure that you uplift these, including UTL, or even attract others, so that there can be, you know, balanced competition, so that the consumers as well can be provided better services?
Yes, I mean, of course, government has tools, and one of the tools is policy. So we, in 2018, we processed the National Broadband Policy, which indeed stipulates a number of issues. But one of those issues is to do with infrastructure sharing, which UCC has developed guidelines for infrastructure sharing to ensure that all operators do not have to come to Naguru Hill or Kololo to erect masts because they want to provide a service. They can utilize just one mast and all of them will be good to go. Now, once we do that, the cost, the capital expenditure is taken away, and therefore the telecom operator can provide a service to the citizen at affordable costs. And indeed, all of them would find a mechanism of equalizing in terms of how much they're charging you. And that's why you see today, many of them, I think, have bundles. They will sell you a bundle at 1,000 shillings for 300 minutes, something of the nature, or 10,000 for several minutes. The reason they're doing that is because the competition is becoming stiffer, but the beauty of it is the numbers actually make sense. If you have 28 million subscribers or people using voice and some of them using data, I think those numbers are quite attractive for them to be able to cut the cost over communications. In saying that, we've also, within that policy, the National Broadband Policy, we've spoken about listing. And I think in the medium term, we shall see the national telecom operators being listed on our local stock exchange so that Ugandans can buy into those companies. And again, in respect to data, the policy also prescribes a minimum, and that minimum was 4 megabytes per second that they should be giving the user so that there is some experience. But I think UCC modified that, which for the good of the user again. I think in the new regulatory regime, you're required to provide 8, which is higher. What that means is that the user, once they get onto the internet, they can download whatever they need to download as fast as possible and therefore use less data.
You talked about sharing with relation to masks, and how does it also play out with regard to planning with other agencies like Uganda National Roads Authority, KCCA? Because we've seen some interruptions. A road is well constructed, then before you know it, people are digging out to lay cables. Can't we be able to provide maybe service lines where everyone can be able to use that? How far have you gone with that so we stop having all this disorganization because someone is putting up their own line?
Yeah, it's true. We've had some uncoordinated movement, but through the coordination of the Office of the Prime Minister, the Ministry of Works is working on utility corridors, whereby if indeed you need fiber, if UNRA is constructing roads, they'll put a utility corridor where water can pass, fiber can pass, and all the rest, the other infrastructure that indeed would require digging of roads. So that's being addressed through the utility corridor, and we are confident that the cuts after the work has been done, for instance, the road has been constructed, it's first class, and then we who want to pass fiber come and dig it up. I think that will be a thing of the past.
Okay. Elizabeth, I'll take you back to our earlier discussion of quality of service coming in from the telcos, coming in from the internet service providers. What is your experience as the Ict Association, and what are some of the recommendations you could be taking out of probably your bad experiences with them? Because I know there are some.
Yeah, there are some, but not that many. As Irene explained, there's always a reason behind it in terms of that. And I'm glad you've touched on the issue of sharing infrastructure. And there's an opportunity not only in sharing masks, and companies like I think ATC are doing that, where they are leasing out masks so we don't have to build those many. But then there's still an opportunity even in the fiber laying, so that we can reduce the cost of maintenance and laying fiber. I read somewhere that Uganda has about 12,000 kilometers of fiber, but in terms of reach, it only reaches about 2,100 kilometers, just because everybody is laying fiber in the same space and they're not sharing. You know, so with regards to quality of service, I know, Irene, both of us were in the telecom sector. When we're looking at quality of service, I believe the service providers have they have the opportunity to redistribute resources where they are required at any point in time. So that way, issues of congestion just because there's a football match in Nambole should never happen. And also, members of the private sector can actually develop innovative solutions that can be, I would say, using technologies like artificial intelligence, where they can be self-healing, predictive of what is going to happen, to the extent where we can even predict we're crossing the Kenyan border, or the Kenyan border is coming into us. So there's opportunity for us to work together with the service providers to develop those type of applications that can actually predict network congestion, predict boundaries for Uganda, and give our give our customers a better experience.
Okay. Yeah. Well, coming to you, Mr. Mugasa, according to an Equal Opportunities Commission report, it was, I think it was about 2019, it was very clear that there are huge gender disparities with more men being employed in the ICT sector than the women, but also when you look at internet uptake and, ICT embracement, it's more on the side of the males than the females, and that's across. Even in MDAs, having to go digital, there are so many people that had to be, literally forced into accepting this new normal. What are you doing about it as an authority?
Yes, thank you, Mildred. As an authority, one of our mandate is to build capacity, the skills capacity within the ICT sector, and we are merging that mandate with the installation of internet to schools and provision of computers to schools, because it's at that point when you want to catch them when they're young, when it is when they have not lost their interest. So you provide the tools, the internet access and facilities to the students at an early age, and they will be motivated to keep up those tools, or using the tools, the ICT tools, and not lose interest in IT. So we cannot. In the office setting, it's probably. I wouldn't want to say you cannot force or change the current setup in the office to say that let's employ more women in the IT sector, but we enable them when they are still within the schools to take up this or to adopt the IT skills, and we are providing in the current project that we are running, RCIP, we are providing 700 computers to schools, to the education sector. We are also providing internet at a lower costing than the other MDAs. So this is going to benefit the students in the schools, and we hope that they will continue with it when they move to the job employment.
Do you have any particular criteria of selection of these schools that will be benefiting from this?
We are working with the Ministry of Education, because they know the schools better than we do. So we have a partnership with the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance. They inform us of the locations of schools, the need of schools. Of course, we would want to make it equitable. We are not going to focus on the schools that already have internet access or that are in a region where there's enough internet access. We are looking at the whole of Uganda. So all schools, regional schools, city schools that are not that privileged to have internet connectivity, and that's what informs us on where to distribute it.
All right, Irene, you have a supplement, but I also want you to highlight, now that we're talking about equity, talking about each and every other person accessing the internet, I want to speak to the Rural Communication Fund. How was it used? What have we gained from this particular fund? What's its impact?
Thank you very much, Mildred, for asking that question and giving me the opportunity to talk about one of the programs we're very proud about. Under the Uganda Communications Act, Uganda Communications Commission is required to establish and maintain a fund for rural communication and ICT development. Now, this fund seeks to, among others, address the gap, because you know that the market will always go where there is money. But not everybody, as you mentioned, in terms of addressing the gaps, there are people who are in the less viable areas where there is not, the returns are not good. Yet at the end of the day, you want them to have services. So this Rural Communications Development Fund, last year it was renamed the Uganda Communications Universal Service and Access Fund, UCSAF, seeks to address that gap from the connectivity side. For example, helping operators, because there's also been a perception of thinking we do the operation, but we actually are just a fund. And all we're doing, as I mentioned, the facilitating. So we encourage the operators to go into those areas by providing them a subsidy towards the capital, so that the cost of entering into that area is reduced. That helped us initially to address the voice coverage. Many sites were established through that fund for voice telephony, and recently many of these were upgraded to 3G, so that we speed up the coverage of internet. Now, having addressed the coverage, we also come to the issue of demand, the demand side. In terms of, for example, you spoke about the issue of gender. We did a study to understand what is exactly the situation, and why are the women not using the services even where they are. And we seek then to address those interventions. We've had, for example, we've been running for a number of years a program where we've established and provide 40 computers to government-aided secondary schools around the country. We've so far addressed over 1,100 schools, and this is not boys or girls, it is government secondary schools. Actually, these have even helped the introduction of the compulsory ICT as a study, because whether a child is in an area that has no electricity, you still want to make sure that you are bringing up a crop that is in the digital, relevant in the digital world. So within this program, we provide schools, both to those schools that are near the electricity network, and we call those on-the-grid schools, and even those ones where there's no electricity in the area. We have a facility for them so that they still have computer labs. Now, when you, again, provide the computer labs, many of these have challenges in terms of the teachers. You want who's going to deliver the training to the students. So we provide also training to ICT teachers, so that there is an availability to teach the children how to be able to utilize and understand ICTs. Now, beyond that, we also know that as a country, many of us remember the days of pipettes, vernier calipers in the labs. But for some of these schools in the rural areas, they don't have those facilities. Yet you want them to be able to compete at the same level with other children who are in schools with those labs. So we came up with scientific digital content that provides them virtual labs. So the children then use those virtual labs to be able to address that. We recently added a new pilot where now, the same way we keep talking about telemedicine and saying, you know, typically they talk about a doctor in India working with a doctor in Uganda, and I always argue it could be a doctor in Kampala working with a doctor in Kabale or Karamoja. It doesn't have to be outside. The same way even in education. Within this pilot, we are seeking a mechanism that shares, so that a teacher that is in Sechisui is delivering a class, and students in other parts of the country are able to get and enjoy from that class through the usage of the ICT labs that they already have. And just going back again, as I said, that is a big project in itself. The issue of the women. One of the things we noted was devices and also understanding. And women, when we are in a bigger class, they tend to keep quiet. They don't ask, they don't become as proactive. So we had specific training just for women to introduce them to the ICTs, help them to understand, like the lady we had in the commercial break, showing her how she can use ICTs to improve her business and grow it and be able to appreciate it. And right now we are also rolling out a pilot where we want to see if we give a solar-enabled tablet to a household. Are we able to uplift that household, noting that, you know, the dad can use that tablet, the mother may be able to use the tablet, the children are also able to use the tablet, so that we address this gap that has been created again through device ownership. so that we see if that's a workable model.
All right, still talking about that, it's Women's Day, and definitely this goes to the heart, because also looking at the demographics, over 50%, 52% of the population are women. And I'm putting this to you, Elizabeth. How are you bringing in the women in the works of the association and empowering them? But also another forgotten group, the persons with disabilities, the deaf and dumb, the blind, I mean, how are we able to bring them on board? Because every other time we're speaking we are talking about the totally abled, people, the ones we're looking at.
Yeah. With regards to women, that's one of the reasons I joined the association, to encourage women to join in the ICT sector. We've been lucky that there's been a lot of outside investment from entities like MasterCard Foundation that are actually providing us with the support that we need, and specifically the youth, and then insisting that the people we employ and we engage with are mostly the women. The part of the mandate is to, when you work with them, you need to provide those services. 70% of the people who get your services have to be women. So it's just, there's no excuse as to why women shouldn't be encouraged. Today we are celebrating Women's Day, and my own company was celebrating 6 ladies that have decided to, one of them is an Uber rider, the other 5 are actually opening up their own border mechanic shops. So they are breaking barriers there. So we're working in the sense to include and encourage young ladies to take on STEM subjects, and providing really credible mentors in that sense. I'll be honest with you, there's been no really concerted effort to help the disabled or the differently abled, and it's something that we really need to work on. It's not an area where we have put any emphasis, and I really believe from this meeting I really need to take it back to the members and see how we can include them. Definitely. Thank you.
All right, to the ministry still, before I get back to you, Irene, Honorable Bajide, how are we looking at the differently abled Ugandans, because they have been left out for a very long time, and they feel like they're not just thought about?
Well, I'll address it in 2 perspectives. First of all, the labs that Irene was referring to, I think are in excess of 1,000 computer labs that RCDF has set up. It's important to note that. And those are across secondary schools in the country, where they put computers that use electricity, but as well as those that are using solar. Now, in respect to engaging the women and people with disability, in the ministry you have a policy on ICT for people with disability, and that is deliberate, because the truth is they were being left behind. And one of our guiding principles is digital inclusion, in the sense that nobody should be left behind. But to do that, we take advantage of the legislation that we do. The UCC Act, as an example, prescribes that the board must have 3 women. No shortcuts. It must have 3 women, and that very law clearly states that one of the members must be a person with disability, because we know the importance of the regulator, UCC, the influence they have on the ICT sector. So it's imperative that one of the people who sits on that board is a person with disability, and he sits at a decision-making level whereby they are able to influence policy within the regulator to see to it that people with disability are indeed well taken care of. But I think Irene can add some of the interventions they are doing, specifically providing equipment to people with a disability.
Irene, go ahead, please. You've been given the leeway.
Thank you very much. As I said, for me, this is a passionate subject that I would want to talk about. Just going back slightly to the women and ICTs. Next month, we celebrate the Girls in ICT Day. And that's also aimed at creating the awareness and helping the mentoring that Elizabeth was talking about, so that the girls come from a young age appreciating and aspiring to engage within the ICT, beyond just using ICTs, but actually engaging. There's also a good program of Coding in Hills. I even like just the title of Coding in Hills. This aims, this aims at getting the girls interested and showing them that they can actually be patient and create something out of it. Now, with regard to PWDs, or persons with disabilities, within the licensing, actually the operators have an obligation to provide services to persons with disabilities and to show what interventions they have put in place specifically to ensure that their services are inclusive of persons with disabilities. However, we recognize the spectrum of disabilities is big. There are very different forms. There are the simple ones where me increasing the volume of the phone, I address persons with hearing disabilities and maybe, you know, have Braille. Within the Rural Communications Development Fund, we've also had a program of providing, the same way we're saying we're providing labs to government-aided schools. We've provided labs, computer labs, or specialized equipment, ICT equipment for persons with disabilities, including devices with Braille or other applications, again, that address. Now, going back to what Elizabeth said and what Honorable was also talking about, the ICTs are in themselves an opportunity for creating other solutions. So it's not about just use of ICTs. We can use these emerging technologies to find creative ways to address and improve the needs of persons with disabilities.
Okay. Coming to you, Mr. Mugasa, earlier on in the discussion we talked about the national backbone infrastructure and what's your capacity, what's the capacity of the NBI compared to what the private sector has? Are you trying to play a complementary role? Is it more of a competitive one?
Yes, thank you, Mildred. The NBI is supporting infrastructure. It complements the current infrastructure within the country. Our capacity is close to 4,000 kilometers at the moment. That compares to, or almost is equal to what I would say the largest telecom provider has laid out in the country. But we support them too in transiting their traffic. So we're not just competing, we're not providing that enabling service, we also support them and enable them to flourish within the ICT sector. So we support the telecoms, we also support other ISP, internet service providers within the country, who are going to provide these services to the last end user, to the citizens of Uganda.
With all the infrastructure that you've put in place as NITA, what do we do, or what happens to government officials who still transact government businesses, for example, using personal mails?
Yes, we drafted policies, the e-government policy, the electronic e-transaction policy, e-signature policy. There are a couple of policies that guide you on, or guide the users of these services on how to use them in a right and secure way, because we wouldn't want to have government information transacted.
Because Uganda is not in isolation. It has happened in the United States as well. It caused quite a lot of discussion. Where exactly is the problem? Maybe that is where we need to start.
Yes, that's in awareness, because after drafting the policies, we also implemented systems, or we are implementing a system, the Unified Messaging Collaboration System, that enables a government official to have a service, an email service within the country. So this cuts down on the risk of transmitting government information to an offshore server, but also it cuts down on the cost, because you are going to have traffic localized. This is a homegrown solution, managed and operated within the country, and the security is provided within the government or within NITA. So it cuts down all those risks and promotes local solutions within the country.
All right, Honorable Bajide, taking you back a bit to the discussion about telcos. In the new licensing regime for the telcos, there is a need for them to, list on the stock exchange and be able to probably get a part of the market share, so that we Ugandans can be able to buy from, buy out some shares and feel the ownership of this, because we always complain about, having these profits taken out of the country. How far are we with that? And also there is the issue of, we're talking about an East African community and the integration. Why do I make a call to Kenya and it's considered as an international call? How about get one unified, price for the calls?
Yes. In respect to listing, indeed, the Capital Markets Authority is finalizing the detail. The policy, as I said earlier, was passed that the national telecom operators shall list. If I'm not mistaken, it's one of the terms and conditions of the license, the licenses that have been issued to MTN and Airtel. The condition is that they shall list, and I think the regulator gives them a time frame within which they will list. And the reality is some of them have listed elsewhere, so it's only fair that they list here as well. But also it's important that Ugandans buy into these companies because they are, because Ugandans are. So it's imperative that we as Ugandans also have a stake in these organizations. And that listing, I think within the next 2 to 3 years, that should be concluded, that they are listed on the stock exchange and Ugandans can buy shares into those organizations. Okay. Now, in respect to the cost of calling between Kenya, you gave specific example, Kenya and Uganda, I think that one has been harmonized within the framework of the Northern Corridor. So the Northern Corridor has provided for an arrangement where I think calls between Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, and South Sudan regarded as local calls. So if you called Kenya, indeed you wouldn't be charged as much money as it was in the past. So that's something that we have taken care of within the scope of the Northern Corridor.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I come back to you, Irene. For a Ugandan who is watching SpotLightUG or a non-Ugandan still on NBS here and on UBC television as well, they have subscribed because we moved from analog to digital. They have subscribed, and at the end of the day, still UBC and NBS TV are expected, while they are the content providers, expected to pay these pay TV, networks or whatever we could call them, providers, to exist on their, network. How does this come through, and what are you working upon it?
Thank you, Mildred, for the opportunity to clarify that. Now, within the licensing regime, we have what we call free-to-air, meaning that the broadcast is received free by the subscriber.
And sorry for interrupting, we still pay for free-to-air because when my subscription is dealt with, I will not watch NBS, I will not watch UBC, and not any other of these local televisions.
And I'm glad you added that context as well. Now, as I was explaining, we have the free-to-air. Now, for you to be a free-to-air, the free-to-air provide infrastructure. Okay, taking a step back, the earlier discussion we had to be able to provide services, you need infrastructure. Now, even for the broadcasters, you need infrastructure. The infrastructure is the road that gets you from your studio to the subscriber. Now, in the case of free-to-air broadcasting, you are carried over Uganda Broadcasting Corporation's network, which is called Signet. So when you're on that platform, your content reaches the subscriber for free. The subscriber does not have to subscribe. Now, because of the reach and also variety of persons who some of them have chosen to already subscribe to broadcasters, the content providers who, in your case, you're referring to as, the TVs, decided they wanted to expand their viewership. So they also chose to have their content carried on these other pay TV platforms. Now, initially, the plan, of course, was that we'd only have one signal distributor, but it was not moving as fast. So this was already infrastructure that was in place, and as we've been having the discussion about infrastructure sharing, the government of Uganda decided we need to leverage whatever is available. So they were allowed to leverage and be carried onto those platforms. So when they go to the pay TVs, they pay them. Now, again, it also depends on what agreement they have entered with the pay TV provider. If the agreement is such that you take my content to the viewer for free, then that agreement will be implemented that way. If the agreement they made with the pay TV provider was to be included in their offering to their pay TV providers, then you're going to pay. However, also for clarification purposes, in all cases, the main channel of UBC, the official UBC channel, is free of charge on all. So it should not expire when your subscription expires. So typically, you should be able to continue watching UBC when your subscription expires. If this is not the case, we encourage the viewers to please let us know, so that we follow it up with whichever service provider that is.
Okay, and some are asking, what is the footprint of Signet? I mean, how many people does Signet reach at the end of the day?
Now, again, we typically talk about coverage in terms of geographic and population coverage. Signet network comprises currently of 17 sites across the country. Practically, wherever they were in the analog world, that was converted to digital. But they too have also embraced the new technologies and looking at alternative technologies available that expand their footprint beyond using those technologies that we are used to, so that the same way you have DSTV coming to your home, you'll have UBC beamed to you directly at home. But I could leave the PS to also add some more information in respect of what government is looking at to be able to enhance UBC offering.
All right, go ahead, PS, please.
Yes, as Irene mentioned, UBC has 17 digital terrestrial transmission sites across the country in areas where they were traditionally analog, operating analog, and indeed we are going to invest in more transmission sites. We expect that within this period, the NDP3 period, we shall have more sites installed to make sure that people, or indeed the broadcasters, do not have to rely very much on pay television for them to be able to deliver services to the viewers, to their viewers. So we've given the Ministry of Finance a plan, and we are confident it's going to be funded so that we expand the footprint of Signet within the country.
Okay, and well, our time is really getting fast spent. There is a lot coming in from the audience, but one question before I leave you, Honorable Vajide, is the aspect of the Communications Tribunal as you know, clearly provided for under the UCC Act of 2013. I remember in 2019 there was a petition by some telecom subscribers still with that regard, and up to now we do not seem to know exactly what happened with the Communications Tribunal. Is it existent? Is it yet to be existent? Because it's what should be dealing with some of the issues we were earlier on talking about.
Yes, yes, indeed, the law provides for a Communications Tribunal to be headed by a person who qualifies to be a judge. And indeed, we have worked on the regulations. The regulations are ready. And we are exhausting consultation because we had more or less finalized, but there was need to do further consultation, and I think that we have exhausted. So First Parliamentary Council in the Office of the Solicitor General is consolidating that. And once that is done, we shall gazette the regulations and then we shall have the office established. We are confident and hopeful that this time round that office will be set up before the end of this year.
Okay.
That one we're extremely confident.
All right. I will now have to start counting down my clock. But Elizabeth, coming to you, what more does government need to do? What more enabling factors would you need as not only an association but ICT practitioners across the country?
Right now, as I mentioned earlier, that we are rebooting our association. And one of the areas that we really need to focus on is constant collaboration with government and the different agencies, so that we are in the know and we can help with some of our strategic outputs, especially when it comes to policy advice, and also collaborating on things like the latest technology. Irene mentioned the fact that they are teaching the ICT teachers how to train the students right now, and yet we have the opportunity to actually collaborate with that to train them in the latest skills, because most of our teachers are still teaching. The skills are changing every day. No, not every day, okay, often. So we have the opportunity to actually intervene at such a young age. So most importantly is keeping the doors open, keeping discussions, and also asking them to recognize us as people that can be relevant in this sector.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Mugasa, before we end off and for your closing remarks, two pertinent questions. One is asking, how can one get NITA to support their initiative? Is there a department or office that handles this? But also another one is, besides the NBI, any other infrastructure that NITA Uganda has set up?
Yes, to get to NITA, we have got customer-facing office under the e-government service directorate, and this is from the business process or BPO, business process outsourcing section, because that's where most of the ideas come from the innovators, startup companies, and even multinational companies that want to invest within Uganda. So our manager, business process outsourcing manager is always willing to meet with them, and we have been meeting and collaborating also with other agencies like the One-Stop Center, because most of the businesses need to open up a business account or business record. So we have a partnership with Uganda Investment Authority, Uganda Investment Authority, Uganda Revenue Authority, and all the other key stakeholders. Okay. But they are welcome to come to NITA. And for the second question, could you just repeat? Any
other infrastructure that NITA has come up with apart from the NBI?
Yes, the NBI is a traffic channel. It's like a point to get from point A to point B. But once you get to point B, what next do you do with the data? So we are building data centers. This is the brains or the operations of the NBI. So we host government systems. We host 161 government systems for more than 80 MDAs. This has cut down the cost of the MDAs building up their own data centers. Okay. We saved close to about 4 trillion Ugandan shillings from the time that the data center has been operational. We also provide Wi-Fi hotspots, free Wi-Fi hotspots around.
Are they functional? That's what Ugandans continue asking. At what times?
Now it's all day, 24/7.
Okay.
Yeah, we have opened it up the whole day, so we can walk around Kampala, and I'll be happy to take you to locations where it's free. That's within Kampala, but we want to expand it even to the whole of Uganda. Within the RC project, we intend to roll out 300 Wi-Fi hotspots all over Uganda.
Okay. Yeah. I'll give you 30 seconds to just give your closing remarks for the discussion.
Yeah. I think we should think homegrown solutions, automated solutions, integrated solutions. That's the way IT should be in government of Uganda. And I believe as NITA and with the support from the ministry and other sector players, we will achieve digitized Uganda.
Okay. And to you, Irene, your time to give us your closing remarks. Many of the questions asked were answered. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just step for 1 minute back to the competition aspect you talked about and the whole duopoly or oligopoly, as you mentioned. This is a sector that is typically looked at as a natural oligopoly. And when I was talking about the functions that we have as a commission, one of them is in respect of promotion of competition. So within our new strategic plan, where our vision is a digitally inclusive, meaning persons with disabilities, gender, age, youth, location, everybody is participating in this digital economy. One of the things we seek to address the barriers of so that we see